We'd like to welcome everyone to the regular board meeting of the directors of the Linn-Mar Community School Board. It is October 28th, 2024. We're in the city council chambers, hopefully for the last time. No pressure on the construction folks. We'd like to welcome everybody that's in attendance this evening, and if you could determine a quorum, please.
Director Foss?
Here.
Director Lau Lancaster?
Here.
Director Mansour?
Here.
Director Maury?
Here.
Director Thomas?
Here.
Dr. Walker?
Here.
President Buckles?
Here. Motion carries. Welcome, Director Mansour. Happy to have you here. At this point, we have any audience communication? We have anybody? Nobody signed up? Okay.
Need it, Barry. Sorry to interrupt. Do we?
I'm sorry. I went past what I did. We need to adopt the agenda as presented. My apologies.
Motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Second.
Motion by Laura, second by Melissa. Thanks for reminding me. Any comments or thoughts? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Sorry about that. Now we're to audience communication. We don't have any. Now we're going to go to the mission moment. Anybody have any comments?
I just thought conferences went really well, so kudos. I was only in one building, but I'm sure that was a representative of how well it went in all the buildings. So I know it's a lot of work. Kudos to everyone who made it through.
I also give kudos to the PTO team at Indian Creek, who are utilizing a fundraising app for the Raise and Roar this year. And man, after, however many years of school fundraisers, like it's fun and it's easy to use. And it was just, I thought, a great use of a tool. So I guess kudos for trying something new. And it's been a really well-performing campaign.
And just a shout out to all of the musical groups that have had their fall concerts. So exciting to see and hear all of the amazing musical talent that's in this community and the great work that all of our performing arts do. I'm just always proud to be part of that.
And a follow-up on that, all the students that participated in All-Site and also Opus, both in orchestra and the band and also vocal music, the hundreds of hours that goes through that. We are a family that long tradition of that. This weekend being very anxious, but just really proud of Linn-Mar's commitment to that. It is a way for many students to get scholarships. And so the investment in their time is definitely can pay off, but also just those who have worked in it, the seriousness and the dedication. So that would be my moment, just seeing how well they compete, but also the camaraderie and the community that they build is just a pleasure.
I'll just add one, and this goes out to the parent volunteers. I've heard a couple stories in the last couple days of parent volunteers being very, very active with activities and facilities, and speaking up when they notice something that could be improved on. And so, it comes back to when you see something, say something. So appreciate parent volunteers.
I'd like to just make one quick comment about America Reads. Personally, I enjoyed that. I know a number of us did that. I had a parent contact me because the day after America Reads, the young child was saying his prayers and he wanted to thank Jesus for sending the readers for America Reads. And Dad said, I didn't even know anything about it. So thank you, Barry. He said he appreciated it. So anyway, that was just kind of cool, kind of neat.
Quick follow-up on that too. Thank you to the building coordinators who reached out to all of us board members, but also to staff, also to our community, because we can't come when we don't get the invitation. So I really got excited bouncing around and going to the different buildings. So thanks very much to the coordinators.
Okay, we go on to the informational reports. Jonathan Galbraith, Chief Financial Operating Officer, will give us our FY24 financials. It'll be on the screen as well.
Thanks, President Buckles. So our financial year in review for our fiscal year of 2024. We'll go through our fund buckets or silos We will go through our certified annual report, the special education supplement, and then our annual transportation report. Just a note here, these numbers are unaudited currently. Our auditors were in last week and we haven't gotten their final report back. So these will be very close and they might be perfect, but we don't know that for certain. And they also might change just a touch after the auditors get done with their work. So wanted to note that. So we'll start here just with an overview of our expenditures out of all of our funds. We had 144 million, just over 144 million dollars in expenditures. Half of that roughly was salaries and another 9% was benefits. So of all of our expenditures across all funds, about 60% of that is for our staff. Next there is purchase services at just under 20%, supplies and equipment at about 7, and AA flow through right about 2.7. So with that, we'll go through our separate buckets of funds. The general fund, which is funded by property taxes, state aid, and miscellaneous income, or expenditures for that is salaries and benefits, materials, utilities. Salaries and benefits make up 80% of that fund, and that is our largest fund at $104 million. Our management fund, fully funded by property tax. Think of that, that's what pays for our insurance. Insurance, early retirement is our largest two expenditures out of that. The next 4 funds there are our capital funds, so they pay for a lot of our construction and upkeep. First is the PEPL, which is funded by property tax. We have a $1.34 voter approved levy, which just was extended in this past year, and then a 33-cent board approved levy for a $1.67 total. Building constructions, vehicles, and equipment that's greater than $5,000 comes out of the PEPL fund. Then we have the SAVE fund, which is the Secure Advanced Vision for Education, most better known as is the 1 cent or the penny sales tax. So that is fully funded by sales tax dollars and allocated to districts on a per pupil basis. Again, capital projects and technology purchases come out of SAVE. Pearl is a 13.5-cent property tax, and that pays for playgrounds and recreational spaces. Most recently, that partially funded the new tennis courts over at Oak Ridge. The debt service fund, that's funded by property tax and interfund transfers. So that pays for all of our debt, principal and interest payments. So it pays for our GO bond debt, our SAVE revenue debt via transfer from the SAVE fund, and our PEPL note via transfer from the PEPL fund. We have our student activity fund. So think all things student activities. That's funded by admissions, fundraisers, student dues, etc. And everything that comes out of there is what supports our co-curricular activities. So activities and athletics, all the expenses for that. Our nutrition fund, that is funded by meal sales and then federal and state reimbursement, and it funds all things food service. So it pays for our salaries for our food service staff, pays for the groceries that are bought, to supply food for our breakfast and lunches for our kids. And then our other enterprise funds, so we have 2 of them. We have our school store, the Roar store, and then the community pool, the aquatic center. So those are fees that come in, goods that are purchased is the revenue, and then the cost on the other side of that is our expenses. So now we'll dive into the funds individually. So we have our general fund. Like I said, this is our largest fund. Total revenues there, just under $105 million. 56% of that comes from our state aid, and 30% comes from property tax, and 8 is other local, and 5% from federal. Our expenditures. So like I said, just under 80% of that is salaries and benefits, so pays for our staff. So roughly $80 million supports our staff throughout the district. And then the other smaller chunks that make up the other 20%, 10 are purchase services, just under 6 in equipment, and our AA flow through at 3.6. So as we look at our general fund revenues and expenditures from FY23 to FY24 comparison, our total revenues there are up just under 5%, and our expenditures are down. Total expenditures are down 0.4%. So that's good. positive of this slide here is if you look at the arrow there, the change in the fund balance. Last year, our change in fund balance went down $5 million. This year, our fund balance grew by $40,000, meaning we had more revenues than expenses. This is the first time in 3 years that we've had that. Um, I think we had some hope there that we would do a little bit better than that, but we are on the right track. If we would have our solvency and our UAB ratios where we wanted them, this is just about as close as you can get to a perfect year as you want, because you really want to spend every dollar for dollar once you hit those matrices. So trending in the right direction, so that is a good thing. So you can see our ending fund balance there at just over $7 million. So a little narrative, I talked about this a little bit. Revenues are up 4.8%, really driven by this the school formula. So our enrollment was down. SSA was at 2.5%. Our new money last year came out to the 1% because of the budget guarantee, but our cash reserve levy, we increased that a little bit there to help our solvency and our unspent balance. And then we did have an increase in our special ed deficit. We'll get more to that here in a little bit.
Can you just for clarity and new people's sake, explain how it's a 2.5% increase in new money, but we're less than 1%? Can you just
Yep.
refresh us on that?
Yep. So the state has what they call a state cost per pupil. So SSA, they multiply that. So say the state cost per pupil times your 2.5% gets you your new state cost per pupil. They take that times your enrollment to get your funding from the state. And then if that does not equal 1% new money from what you were previously, they bump you up so you get 1%. You get to do that one time. You're welcome.
When you say you get to do that one time,
You can't do it in back-to-back years.
okay,
So
that's
you
what
can,
I wanted.
yep.
Okay,
I'm so sorry. You can do it more than once. You just can't do it in back-to-back years.
okay, thank you.
And our expenditures are down 0.4%. So FY24 was our first year of our 2-year budget reduction plan, which is why you see our expenditures down that 0.4% there. So as we look at our matrix for the general fund, remember that the board goal here and board policy, our target is not to be less than 7%. So our solvency ratio did dip a little bit, and I'll be able to explain that a little bit more on the next slide. So we're still down there. UAB dropped just a touch, but fairly close there. I think the important part of this slide is as you look at the trend lines from up above, that those have flattened from what we've seen over the last 3 years. So that's getting us to the right point to be able to make that jump back up and get above those 7% goals that we have. So as we look at the general fund balance and the breakdown of that, so there's really 3 categories. There's restricted, assigned, and unassigned. So our solvency ratio only takes into account the assigned and the unassigned and does not take into account the restricted. So the restricted is our categorical funds, TQ, PD, TLC, those sorts of funds, and they have a purpose that we have to spend those for. So our fund balance does not take that in consideration. And as you see where the growth was through that was really in our restricted funds, which is why our solvency ratio didn't really look like it changed, even though our overall fund balance grew. So we've had some meetings on that in cabinet and really wanted to dive in and say what are things that we're paying for that would be eligible expenses out of those restricted funds so that we can spend those down, number one, and number two, that would help our overall ratios as well.
John, just for fun, I left my cheat sheet at home, so all these acronyms, although lovely, may be going over, well, some of our heads. Although we may understand them once they are broken down, it does sound there's a lot of information within one of those. So, not that I'm asking you to use all of them, but there was a sentence I think that had at least 3 or 4 in one sentence. So I'm just throwing that out there. There's a lot of acronyms.
Katie, it's the Goldilocks thing that I was
Yeah, there
excited
you
about
go.
last night.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I left I usually have my sheet right here.
No
But
problem. I can give you a few of them. So TLC is our teacher leadership funds. PD is our professional development. There's also statewide voluntary preschool program, SWVPP, if you want the acronym for that one. Yeah, so that's a few of them, the categorical funds. Every once in a while.
I also wanted to thank you for giving us so much context and historical data in this chart. Um, Seeing that longer term trend versus just compared to last year, I think is very valuable. Thank you.
I should say, any other questions on the general fund before we jump ahead to the other funds? No? All right, student activity. So the student activity.
Sorry, John. Brain took too long. In 30 seconds or less, can you explain why the general fund in 21 so much larger than the general fund in either 23 or 24?
Very simple, Esther.
Which stands for?
Yeah, so the COVID money, the COVID relief funds from the federal government.
The things that went away.
We got special assistance from the
Correct.
state to use for, because of all the extra challenges and demands all of a sudden that came upon us because of running COVID, public schools during COVID.
Yeah.
Those were a one-time,
But ESSER was federal.
yep,
That's
sorry,
what's
federal.
Yep.
Just
And those were
clarify.
one-time funds, not ongoing funds. So that's why you see that increase in there, and it's not been maintained because of that. Just one-time funding. Everybody good? All right, student activity. So student activity fund is comprised of the various athletic club and other activities accounts. Each of those individual accounts are required to maintain a positive balance. They all do that. That's a good thing. We can look at revenues and expenditures a little bit overall for the entire student activity fund. Revenues are up about $10,000 and expenses are down. But as we look at our overall fund balance, they did grow that fund about $150,000 last year. So that's not a bad thing. Ending fund balance of just under $1 million in the student activity fund. So they have a healthy fund there, and that's good for our kids. Gives them some opportunities to do some things moving forward. Management fund. Total revenues on that is down 33%. Remember, that's all funded by property tax. That is one fund that the board controls what that levy rate is, which generates what the revenues are. Also remember that this funds our early retirement package, which we had the second of a 2-year agreement and the first of a 2-year agreement. So we kind of had two packages that we were would be paying for this. So that's a lot of the reason why you see the change there. And why the expenditures are up. So as you can see there, the fund balance is down a bit due to that, about $300,000. And then also property and casualty premiums are up over 12%. So, and those have continued to grow.
For the property and casualty premiums, are those related to derecho and all of that related expenditures that we have seen just across the whole state?
Correct. Yeah. So that has a lot to do with it. I think the other thing that's in there is the structure of how our insurance works with our deductibles with wind hail claims that they've kind of done what they can to control that a little bit, but there is a little more exposure there as far as what our deductibles would be in an event like a derecho again. So having that balance there to be able to cover those deductibles as well.
Okay.
Hey, John, real quick. We keep hearing from parents about how can we help minimize costs for them, and so here we see it right here in that the management fund, because it's based on the tax revenues or the assessments. Sorry, that's lower for 24 than it was for 23. And so as we just continue to point out places where that shows up, right, where the board has worked hard to to reduce costs and to limit cost increases for our taxpayers and for our students and families. So just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
All right, the Pearl Fund, Public Education Recreation Levy. We are one of I don't know the number for sure. Not a lot of districts in the state that have this. If you don't have it, you can no longer get it. That was changed in legislation last year. So we're lucky enough to have it. It's a 13.5 cent levy that's funded through property tax. It has the public component of it. So like our tennis courts, we need to be able to allow the public to use those. The Oak Ridge track, we have to allow the public to use those. Any of those spaces, it has to have the public component in order to be paid through the Pearl Fund. So I guess I list that up there. The expenses were to finish the tennis court project, and then we also had some expenses for the new playground over at Westfield that was put in this last summer. So you can see our fund balance there is kind of dwindling a little bit, but that's due to those projects. So we have some ongoing expenses that come out of the Pearl, but for the most part, it's been kind of a little bit of a savings from year to year to year until there is enough of a fund balance there to help do one of those larger type projects. Save fund, secure and advanced vision for education, statewide pennies tax. Uh, Revenues here are up about 16 or 1.6 million, and expenditures are down about 10 million. A lot of that is from the way that the bonds that were issued for the new administration building. These are sales tax dollars are collected at the state level, and then they're distributed to the districts based on the certified enrollment per pupil count. So the revenues then fluctuate based on how much sales tax is collected. So revenues are down. We talked about that. And then the fund balance is due to the issuance of the bond for the Performing Arts Center or high school performance venue. We issued that $16 million bond last year. And we have 61.28 million of saved debt outstanding as of June 30th.
John, just a quick question, not to do with that for sure, but we keep hearing on the state level that revenues are down. Is that going to affect us next year then? Is that what that means? It doesn't affect us this year?
Quite possibly, yeah.
Because, the sales, the saved dollars are always up.
Right.
All of our valuations on our properties are up. You would think all of those pieces would come through. So it'll be kind of interesting because people do ask that question.
Yes, it will be interesting. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, revenues throughout the state, when that's down, obviously that's what our taxes are, that's
Yeah.
what the taxes are based on.
Yeah.
So that means there'd be less to go around. So yeah, it'll be interesting how that does turn out. The one thing too, though, Barry, I think is if you look at our enrollment statewide is also down, and since it's per pupil, how do those things play, and what does that turn out for that per pupil cost too?
Right. Yeah. Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, physical plant and equipment levy, PEPAL. Like I said, this was extended for another 10 years last year. So this will go through 2035, which is good. Revenues are up. That is specifically related to the property valuations and how those change. And our total expenditures are down just a little bit. We have 1.21 million of PEPAL debt outstanding. We will make our last payment this fiscal year and will not have a PEPAL note. Once that's paid off, end of fund balance, we are up a little higher than I would like to see, but we do have some projects coming up in order to try to get that spent down and kind of figuring out our next 10 years of PEPAL and how that plays into that to get some of that spent, because we do know we have some needs out there at the buildings to take care of. So our other capital projects, I'm going to try to explain this to not confuse everybody. So bear with me a second here. So other capital projects, this is what we call Fund 35. So really what this is when we issued bonds for the new administration building, those are SAVE revenue bonds. That revenue comes into SAVE and then is transferred to another capital project. So it's just a tracking mechanism for how you receive that revenue and then where your expenses come out of. So you know how much you've spent, how much has come in and how much you've spent for those bond proceeds specifically. Now you don't have to do that, and we didn't do that with the new performance venue. Those landed in SAVE. I say all of that because as you look at the revenues, it's like, holy cow, why are we down $14 million worth of revenue in this fund? That's why. The other revenue from the new performance venue bonds, that stayed in SAVE.
How do you decide which projects go in here and which ones stay?
Honestly, you can do it either way, and that's all completely legal. So generally, your GO bond projects would have to come out of here. because you're not going to put that back in your save or in your PEPAL. But you can do that with any bond issuances, whether they're GO bond or save revenue bonds. So revenues are down. Bond issue was in FY23. Expenses are up because the majority of the expenses for that administration building came in this last year. So you can see we have about $6.36 million of revenue bond proceeds left to finish up the administration building as of June 30th.
John, how do you determine whether or not a project hits the threshold for either coming out of PEPAL or capital projects fund, like updates to a classroom or theater from like the last meeting, things like that? Are those, if it's under a certain threshold, do those come out of a different fund, and over a certain threshold come out of these, or do all of those things come out of these two funds?
Maybe a couple of different things. So I would say if they're kind of what I would call a capital expenditure, and I don't know if I necessarily have a dollar amount on that, but if it's more than we have this, it needs fixed. That's generally always been a PEPAL, a maintenance and repair
Okay.
project. Now that doesn't mean a capital project can't come out of PEPAL, but I think on the second part of that is how were those funds laid out originally in a facility master plan, and how will they be laid out going forward? And then also consulting with Piper Sandler, who's our financial advisor that helps us with our cash flow projections, because we do have to make sure we have enough save funds and enough PEPAL funds to cover the debt that we have there. So then what do we have left over for cash flow needs, and where does that fit in?
Okay. Thanks.
Debt service, so this is funded by property tax and interfund transfers. So we pay our GO bond debt out of this, which is what the property tax revenue is coming in for. We also pay our save revenue bond debt via transfer from the save fund, and we pay our PEPAL note debt via transfer from the PEPAL fund. So this is really pretty close to being for every dollar in, every dollar goes out. A lot of what you see in those change in the fund balances is due to the kind of the nice interest rates we've seen recently as that money's been in there. So we do have about $500,000 in that fund due to interest that we've received as our money sits waiting for the payments because they're issued twice a year. And we have $60.7 million of GO debt outstanding. We are down to 2 GO bonds. We paid off one of them here this past year, so that's good. And enterprise fund nutrition services. Revenues here are down about $400,000, and expenditures are up 26,000. As we look at FY24 there and the change in the fund balance, we're right at $62,000. That's maybe a little lower than you want to be, but as you look at our end of the year fund balance of $3 million, we do have a little work to do in here to spend money, which kind of seems a little counterintuitive from everything else that we say. So nutrition fund is I mean, everything's a not-for-profit, but the guidance from the USDA on this is to only have 3 to 6 months of expenditures in your fund balance, and we're higher than that. So we have some things we need to work through to spend that down. Now, it's not like we're in trouble for that necessarily, but we need to do take a look at that and see what expenses we can have. Now, the difficult part is when that balance grows, which was due to federal reimbursement post-COVID when we had all meals free for a couple of years, is the limited expenses that you can have out of this. You know, we're not going to buy more food that we can't use. You really don't want to do a lot with ongoing expenses, staffing, because as you can see in FY24, we landed about right where we needed to. So we have some ideas to work through that and try to get back into that 3 to 6 months range. So I mentioned that revenues were down. The number of meals served were also down quite a bit there. So that's not that entire percentage change, but that's really what drove that was just serving less meals this last year.
Can you explain serving less meals in that we no longer are providing meals for all students free of charge? So this would be, we serve 3.8 meals percent less than, I mean, can you give me like who's that 3.8% less eating with us? And when you asked, the reason I thought of that is when you said we have money that it's an increase and it's sitting there, can we at all go back to some more, everyone eats, there's more free meals we cannot? Oh, okay.
No.
Because Other school districts do that though, and we choose as a school district to not do that.
I wouldn't say we choose as a school district. Um, they might qualify as CEP schools, or they qualify enough that their district is entirely CEP. I know a district close by has gotten really close to be able to qualify their entire district for CEP, and then they would all be reimbursed meals at that point.
So it's a percentage of the school district has to qualify. In qualifying that swings into the entire district. Okay,
Correct.
thank you for that clarification.
I wondered about as far as how we can spend because we're talking about the cost of goods and um,
Mhm.
salaries and benefits. But just for clarification, I think I know the answer to this question. But if they need a new oven, right? Does this money also go towards some of the equipment in the kitchens?
It can. So it can fund any equipment up to $10,000, number one. Number two, there's also a list that is put out by the state, and if the equipment falls on that list, you can purchase it out of the nutrition services funds, no matter what it cost. Number three, if it's over 10,000 and it doesn't land on that list, you can put in a request to state to be granted the okay to purchase out of nutrition. So yes, kind of. Now, if we think about the cost of some of those pieces of equipment, like a new fridge, you can buy a new fridge, a new cooler, new freezer all day long. They're less than $10,000, but you do have some pricier equipment. I don't know exhaustively what's on that list. If that is pretty then all encompassing of the rest of the equipment that you need in a school kitchen, or if that's lacking. So yes, you can, but I think you're probably limited in somewhat. Now, I think it would also be worth the conversation with the state to say, listen, here's our fund balance. We're trying to spend this down so that we can get back into compliance. Here's our way to do that. Here's the equipment purchases we would like to make in order to do that. You might have a little better success.
Okay, because I know, you know, the quality of tools you have in a kitchen can make a huge difference in both your experience being using those tools and the outcome of that. So that's why I wanted to ask. And also, like, thank you for your not like to have that detailed level of delineating everything out. Like, I just appreciate you. So anyhow, thank you.
Thank you.
And just a real quick comment on that 3.8% decrease. We might think that's through all of the schools, but from what I'm seeing, your high school kids, a lot of those kids duck out and go home for lunch or go somewhere for lunch. So that can be a high percentage of that from what I'm observing from my side of the street anyway. So
So wait, just for clarification. So that's just an observation. We don't actually have data on that.
no.
I would,
But,
I,
but we
we
have a
have, so,
three,
yes, so we have data on how many meals, how many breakfast, how many lunch meals are served in every single building, but that is just a district number.
Okay,
What
I
I-
was
that's
just
why I
more
said that.
asking, like, what you're saying a guess or an observation versus like, oh,
Absolutely.
we know. Okay,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
okay. I just
Yeah.
wanted to double
Yeah.
check.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, the aquatic center, total revenues down, about $10,000 there, expenses up, about 30. So good thing there is that their fund balance grew just a little bit, which is really right where you kind of want to set there. They do have a decent fund balance of $276,000. Um, and I didn't fix this, but you're gonna be mad at me. The programs include swimming, diving lessons, youth swim team, not adult lap swim, um, which good or bad probably depends who you are. But the good of it is that our youth are just so involved there that they use that pool every hour of the day. And unfortunately, the adult lap swim is the thing that we can't provide anymore because our kids are too busy swimming in that pool. So
I'm sad, but it's okay. Uh, can you talk about why, like, did they make a big expenditure is that where the difference is coming from? Like, what's with the change?
yeah, so they had their scoreboard needed some fixing here in this past year, so a little bit of capital expenditure out of that aquatic center fund to get that fixed. And I know we've had some conversations on that on how do we kind of plan that. Um, and the aquatic, we'd like the funding for the aquatic center to take care of everything at the aquatic center. We know that that can't happen, so there's other funds that can support that too, if needed. But really, kind of as you look at the cyclical nature of the things that go on in there, the aquatic center is able to fund most of those repairs as long as we don't have everything happen in 1 year. And if they do happen in 1 year, that's what we have our PEPAL and our saved funds for, to be able to make those repairs and keep it operational.
Speaking of scoreboards, we've talked a couple of times at the table about the football field scoreboard, and while we're talking about the budget, um, there was a slide about, the sports and facilities, and so where hypothetically would money for a new football field scoreboard come from?
PEPAL.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, John, real quick.
I just wanted to circle back to I just wanted to thank you for knowing, because it can look one way to just look at a chart and say, oh, well, our revenues are down and they spent more money. But to know that it was a planned expenditure and like that tells a different story when you look at this. So I just thank you for the clarification there.
Yep.
Can you share, do you know why we have an enterprise fund for the aquatic center, but we don't have one for like the stadium, or
So
why is that called out?
I would say, we don't have any non-Linn-Mar sports that Linn-Mar, how do I want to say this? We have the Linn-Mar swim team, high school team, and the club team that both use the aquatic center, and we have swim lessons that go on the aquatic center that have the fees that go with them. The stadium, we really don't have anything that operates in that way. That's a revenue generating team club program where we would have to be able to account for those funds because of that stadium. Does that make sense? I don't know if I explained that very well, but
I think
Revenue generating.
yeah, we don't really have anything revenue generating that happens at the stadium. I mean, obviously the football team plays there, the soccer teams play there, but those are extracurricular activities through Linn-Mar and not separate from Linn-Mar.
We have special events at those events that generate special monies. I'm thinking like we just had the big marching band, so forth and so on, that are taking place there, that would seem to be in addition to a football stadium plus in revenue. But you're saying there's not an ongoing in way to maintain its needs consistently. Okay. And then obviously the student ticket sales go into the student fund anyway, so we actually are still seeing that money come in. It's just not specific to that facility, building, or moment. So we won't have to do that with the performance center either. It won't be a standalone. It will be absorbed. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Now, through our facilities use manual, the stadium is able to be rented. I would imagine we will do the same thing at the performance hall, but that would be to an outside groups, and we have to have the insurance and the agreements, and so different than we're not generating revenue because of programs we're putting on.
Yeah, thank you. Good,
And
good
just
question.
remember, as you've all heard here, it's not a football stadium. It's a multi-purpose activity facility and music facility. So it's used by
Yeah.
many, many organizations.
Heck, yes, it is. Oh my goodness, I've seen so much activity there.
Anyway, sorry.
All right, Roar Store, total revenues are up here, total expenditures are up here. I think that one's kind of easy to figure out in that everything costs more. So they have more expenditures because a sweatshirt and a t-shirt cost more money. So therefore they have to turn around and sell it for more money in order to stay solvent. So they made $3,000 this year, up $400 from roughly $400 from last year. Positive balance. All good there.
I'll put a plug in for the Roar Store real quick. We talk about buying local, and when you come to the Roar Store when they're open, it's very local for us, for our kids. I know I walk by certain store in certain aisles, and I see lots of Linn-Mar stuff, but getting it from the Roar Store has got that local piece. So
I love that we have the Roar Store.
I love the Roar Store. I would include the model though to be somewhat financially prudent. I watched a family with 3 young children come in, and truly they could not have walked out with a very few items. It is intended to be a store that you can go look and then walk away. I mean, it's not our only generating. It's supposed to be a tool in learning how to manage a store, and it has a greater purpose, I guess, than just getting apparel out there in the community. It's really to show and be a business model for these students. And so I appreciate they even have guests come in and talk about how that can be used in the Marion community or the Cedar Rapids community and engaging in it. So it has an educational model to it as well. So yes, it is to sell merchandise, but it's not our sole goal for that.
And we do get compensated from licensing agreements with various stores in the community as well. So just, we don't see those numbers. It's a percentage, but we do. So
Yeah.
yep. Just to share that, yeah. Not to take anything away from the Roar store because it's a wonderful store. So
All right, special education supplement. So there's a little more history here than in the previous slides, but 4 years worth. Our revenues are down 100, $250,000 roughly. Expenses are up about $800,000. So our deficit did grow roughly $1 million from FY23 to FY24. Yeah, we've dug into this quite a bit. I don't know if we have any certain answers yet, that I did compare FY23 to FY24, and some of the bigger ticket items that we can see. Our tuition in receipts were down, meaning that we didn't have as many students coming, or shouldn't say that because it might not be student count because of the weightings, but less revenue there. Our Medicaid was down about $640,000 this year. So our total revenue was down 245. Our salaries were up $340,000, which with our 3% negotiated agreements last year, that's really about 3% of what our salaries were. So that looks pretty what we would expect, I guess. Our transportation costs are up, and our tuition out total is up as well. So with all of that said, that gets us roughly at that $1 million. So we're still kind of diving into that and trying to figure out what can we do different. How do we stop this slide, or how do we slow this slide? We were just at a meeting today, and 96% of districts across the state of Iowa have a special ed deficit. We were talking with our UEN group, and I think there was about 10 of us on the call, and all 10 of them were deficit increased from last year to this year. So,
John, can you speak to, is it similar though? Are we, not only do we have a debt, not only can we see that, and let's see the similarities, is the amounts looking somewhat similar, or
I think it depends on district to district and size of district. And it'd be interesting because I think when you looked at that, you would also want to see what your special ed enrollment weightings were as well, and how many students were at each weighting. I think there's a lot of variables there to say, are we in comparison to what this other district is? I think it'd be very hard to see just on the surface without digging into all those details.
John, I think I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the Medicaid reimbursement. I know that that's something that's not well understood, and the impact of that and what that really looks like for on the family side as well as on the school side. Can you just talk a little bit about what that's been looking like for us and conversations that have been happening?
I can a little bit, and Melissa, I might lean on you just a touch here too. Um, so I know the big thing with Medicare this year is that this is the first year that parents had to recertify with the state in order to be able to have claims filed. It's the first time since 2020. They waived that during COVID. So we don't know for certain that that was part of it, but we do know that we had some students that their families didn't recertify for one reason or another. And talking with Melissa and her team, like that's kind of always a little bit of what can we or what should we do in the event we don't have a student that's certified. So it's one of those that's kind of a tough conversation to feel like you can force families to do that.
For most of the families, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, so feel free to just say I have no idea. But we know of the families that have access to Medicaid funding, how many of them we are able to actually bill for what are eligible for?
I don't know that
Okay,
off the top of my head.
totally okay.
No.
Let me get that straight though. There are some families who qualify for Medicaid funding, right? So it's no out of pocket expense for them. And then they get a service from the school district. And so we would be able to resolve our deficit because we would be able to collect from the federal government. So no out of pocket expense to the family.
Correct. I wouldn't say that would resolve our special education deficit. It would help us. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's no out of pocket expense to the family. That's correct, right?
It's
I believe so.
paperwork.
Yep. It's a reimbursement
Yeah,
from
it's
state.
So
paperwork.
there's a gap there.
So, yes, I can answer some of those questions. So we know the number of students in our district who have a Medicaid number assigned to them by the state. Then we have to take that number and figure out how many of those students have an IEP, an individual education plan, Katie program. How many of them have that? And then of that number, we need to look at how many of those that have an IEP have Medicaid billable services on them, because we can bill for health, behavior, and transportation at a rate that is set by the state every year. Then if they have that, we need to determine if we've had received consent from the family or not to bill for Medicaid dollars. We are obligated by state and federal regulations to bill for Medicaid. So it's not that we have a choice. We have to make an attempt to do that to recoup the money for those services. If a parent consents, we go back through and we start billing for Medicaid as soon as we possibly can. If parents do not consent, then we cannot bill for Medicaid. It does not impact their community-based, family-based services. It's just us billing for the services that they receive while they're in the school setting with us for health, behavior, and transportation. One of the examples is we didn't collect as much last year for transportation because we didn't have students on buses long enough. I'm not going to put a student on a bus for a longer period of time, so we can simply bill for Medicaid dollars. If our transportation rocks so much that they can get Johnny home in 15 minutes and the increments are 20, then that's what we have to go with, what the state increments are of billable services and the rate that the state gives us each year for those things. So we know how many kids have a number. And so to complicate it even more, Justin, is that just because that student has a number doesn't mean they're eligible every month. So we sometimes bill for them and then find out for January through February, for whatever reason out of our control, they weren't eligible to receive funds that month. So it's really a matter of putting all the pieces together. And that's what we're working diligently to go back and look at each one of those kids that we know we have a number for and figure that out. But we are never going to force a consent, and parents can always, with all things special education, they can consent, they can withdraw at any time based on what they want to do. That's their right as a parent.
Thank you.
Another follow-up question, and again, I know the answer, but I want to ask to double check. Are there things maybe in the special education delivery plan that are going to be more challenging because we don't want, like, where does we want to do all the things, um but there's, we're spending in the red versus, like, what's the balance of doing the things we want to do, if the deficit's big anyway, like, we need to solve this. If we did solve it, we could do these things. I think you know what I'm getting at. So just, I don't know, 30 seconds max. I know that's a huge question, but I think the biggest thing is to ensure that we have the staff in place to do the work. Okay. So it's finding those quality staff, retaining those quality staff members, and I mean that teachers as well as associate. But also then one of the biggest things to make sure that we implement our plan with as much fidelity as we possibly can, there is that need for collaboration time. So again, that's where there's a resource to allow to make sure we have that planning and collaboration. So our teams are doing a phenomenal job with that in terms of what we have in place right now. It's just how do we continue to find that collaboration time and continue to have the staff that we need based on that caseload. We are looking at the caseload on a weekly basis now based on how teachers are doing that. So that's really helpful for us so we can monitor where we're at with that. So there's been a lot of positives in terms of the monitoring, Laura, but there's still room for us to continue to grow and train everybody on how to make that happen.
I-
Thank you.
I have a quick question. So if we were to get all the Medicaid forms signed, will we still be in a deficit?
I would assume as much based on what our Medicaid reimbursements have been for past years. Um, so last year they were 1.3, $1.4 million. And I think previous years to that, it's right around in that neighborhood. So that would not, it wouldn't erase our $6 million deficit, no.
But would it reduce the deficit?
Yes, absolutely it would. Yep,
So you said we're down about 600,000.
yep.
So in terms of going up $1 million, if we had gotten the 600,000, we'd only gone up 400,000. So it would make a dent, at least in the rise of the deficit, and it would move us in the right direction.
Yep.
Just one last thought. We see this as a standalone slide. It is not an evaluation of our commitment to our families with children with special needs. That is very important to not only us as the board members, but to throughout this whole district. So it is sometimes challenging when one area or one demographic group gets pulled out in a specific slide, but its funding is a little different, and how we achieve some of those fundings are different. And I know that's why this is like this, but I just wanted everyone to know this is a huge priority of our district to never ever leave a student behind. So it looks challenging. It is.
Yep.
I
So
think
the
it's
reason this is a separate slide is, so we have three year-end state reports. We have the CAR, which is kind of every slide up to this point, and then we have the special education supplement, which is what this is. That's our second report. And then the next slide you'll see is the annual transportation report, and that is the three year-end state reports we have. So I'm kind of reporting on all three of them, and it happens to be that the special education supplement is one of those reports.
I think it's important to note, I don't know if it was last meeting or 2 meetings ago, like every fall, we approve the request. The deficit still gets paid. It just gets paid from the general fund. So every fall, we make a request to the state to have permission to increase our spending authority to cover the deficit. And that money comes out of our general fund. So the services get paid. It's not that we have the $6 million and we can't afford it. We pay the $6 million. It's just not paid by the special education funding that is set up. It's paid for by the general fund every year through a transfer. I think that's an important distinction to make to the community.
Correct. Anything else?
Okay, thanks, John.
Annual transportation report. Number of miles are down from FY23. Sorry, the average number of student transported is down, miles are down, transportation costs are up. And then we have just our average cost per mile traveled, $8.08, and average cost per pupil transported is $785. So a little bit of a change there. Number of students are down. We knew that with some of the budget cut things that we had last year. And yeah, costs are up. It's a little bit normal there with increases in salaries and benefits and increase in fuel costs. So
It, John, is it mostly the fuel cost, or when I was doing the math here on this, just subtracting out the miles and subtracting out the, the number of students, it was, I was searching for answers on why we saw the overall transportation costs go up so much, considering the main two pieces there were had dropped. Wasn't sure if it's because even though we have fewer students transported, we still have sunk cost in running the bus the entire distance.
yeah.
So I was just kind of curious if you had any overarching theme there.
I'd have to dig in deeper, Justin, to let you know. I can break that down a little bit to see where is that in. Is that mostly in fuel? Is that mostly in people? What does that look like? My guess is it's probably mostly in staffing. FY23 we ran pretty darn lean where we had mechanics and even Brian driving a lot of the routes. Where last year we were kind of got our staffing levels back up where we really wanted them, closer to we wanted them to be. We're still a couple short, but that would add into it as well as just our number of FTE that we would have had in FY23 versus FY24. But I could dig in deeper and find out what that breakdown looks like.
Yeah, it would just be good to understand if we've got our staffing where we want it to be, if we think that that's the new number that we should plan for, or if we expect wide swings in that. That'd be great. Thanks.
Yep.
John, can I ask one other clarifying question? Just, does this include obviously bus routes, but also special trips that the transportation provides? So it's not apples to apples, right? I mean, it's costing us X amount of dollars when we're transporting within X amount of miles of the school. But does this include though those extra long trips and when we've had to get charter, and it does not count any of the charters. That's outside of that.
Yep.
But it does include going to Iowa City. If you had to go to Iowa City, that's all blended together. Okay. The reason when I looked at this, I thought, oh my goodness, those kids, each one of those kids getting on a bus is costing the district $700 to transport them for a year. That's actually not an accurate representation. That's what I mean, that's what you broke it down to. But little Johnny or Susie, that may not be the cost to get them back and forth to school.
Correct. And I would say, just about every kid's different because some are on the bus for 5 minutes and some are on for 45 minutes, right? So yeah, that's just the overall average. Any other questions?
This was good, John. I really appreciate the
Standing.
the responses. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
John.
you, John.
Appreciate it. Okay, moving to 502 Policy Committee. We've had a couple meetings, myself, Director Thomas, Director Walker. Any comments or thoughts? Everybody had the stuff given to them previously, so questions were wide open.
And give a really brief update. We're not quite ready to bring anything forward, but we're still collecting information, reviewing, and to be able to have a work group at some point soon.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me is, we're taking this very seriously, having conversations and trying to understand all the information that goes into it. And we did discuss whether a work session would be helpful so that we can all hear from, a legal somebody who's able to legally interpret some of the complexities that are going into these things, and we can all get on the same page, and kind of work through those. So that was it.
Yeah, and just for the public, the two things that we're really looking at are social media and facility naming rights. And like Laura just said, we would like to have a work session with our legal team instead of going back and forth with Amy and myself and whoever. So we're getting that scheduled moving forward, and I'm sure that will answer a lot of questions for us. So any others are open.
Yeah, the biggest thing I'll say with the social media is that there's just so much nuance involved in it that there aren't a lot of cut and dry answers. And so when we looked at moving things into the operational manual, even being able to say only the board president can do this or only when board members do that. She's like, well, it really just depends on how they say what they're saying. And then if they say it this way, then they have to do it this way. And if they say it that way, then they have to do it that way. And so it becomes more of a just board education than clear policy instructions, and can and cannot. So that's why we decided it would be better to have a discussion within the board session on that.
Just for clarity, you guys have talked about social media, but you're talking about social media use for the board.
Yeah.
Correct.
This is
Yes.
nothing about teachers or students or
No.
parents or anything like
This
that.
is
Yeah.
a board policy on board member use of social media, what's allowable, what are the guidelines surrounding that, what things go in policy, and then what things go in our board operations manual, for how we engage with our own social media accounts, what we can and can't do, when it comes to things like blocking and other things like that. So there's just lots of nuance involved, and unfortunately, there aren't a lot of cut and dry answers because things that we thought were cut and dry aren't as cut and dry anymore. So, yeah.
But I'd say we definitely welcome questions from the rest of the board, or thoughts here. And Barry, can you clarify when you said we want to hear from our legal team? Can you just
Well,
that
there's That's probably not a good choice of words. I guess I watch too much TV. Just kidding.
The Colts
When,
legal team.
when we have a legal team, what I mean by that is we have a personal lawyer that we use as a school district. And we also use the IASB, Iowa Association of School Boards legal team as well. So we have access to both of those when it comes to all of this. So appreciate it.
And we would be,
We're trying to bring them in either face to face or on a call.
okay. It'd be our district legal team, or I
Yeah.
want clarification because that was kind of a,
Yep. So the request has gone over to the IASB attorney, and if they're not available, then we could turn our attention to our own district council.
okay. Thank you.
That's a better choice of words. District council.
Thank you.
Questions? Anybody? Okay. 503, School Improvement Advisory Committee. Directors Lau, Lancaster, Maury, and Thomas. You met, I assume?
We did. We met and I'm willing to, we have notes from the meeting that I think would be, provide the best clarity, but you might want to just give a feel for what we experienced. Because the first takeaway I had was the ability as a committee to really go through the big document that we all tried to digest and spending more time in it. I've now had the privilege of doing that 3 times with 3 different committees, and you start getting the vocabulary down, you start seeing some nuances. And you also have an opportunity each time you read it with somebody else, even if it's a friend, you start realizing that their questions may be similar to yours or they saw it picked up on something else. And dialogue is really important to be able to digest this. But I appreciated being able to walk through that in detail. The group also talked with obviously the strategic plan, but we also had an opportunity to do some work in smaller groups within the conversation. We meet very fast and furious, so the group is very, very dedicated to meet in very, very intentional with our time. And so I just want to come up with some summaries. The team discussed that 45% rating for the adult student relationships, noting that options like strongly agree or agree may be challenging. The reason we brought this up is that some of the buildings saw that they may have some challenges with relationship building in their building, but also the language of that questions and series of questions. Especially from a third grade perspective versus an older grade perspective, may be different. We also got to see there is a very wonderful conversation about how COVID fit into our progress of our schools in general, and also being very aware of indicators where there are some communities that have been left out within our community, and that they are not yet making up for that lost time. And what does that mean? And how do we ask questions? Particularly, I personally like page 101 because 101 gives you the colorful chart that helps you kind of see where the groups have moved by grade. It does not explain by building per se. And that's something to think of when we see all the summaries. We go, oh, look at, I mean, Linn-Mar is outstanding, which it is. But you look and we want to make sure no building or a group of students got left behind because we did not give them all the opportunities that maybe they needed specifically to keep up.
Jump in there.
Go ahead.
I was at the table, so I got to hear that particular conversation and committee members talking about page 101 is the cohort data. And yeah, that as a district, we have bounced back.
Mhm.
But as cohorts, they're kind of the term that was used at the table was yo-yo, and that not all of those cohorts are where they were in 2019, 2020. They're kind of going back and forth, and that looking at unique building situations as opposed to a district-wide. As a district, we're doing good, but is a building getting left behind? Is a grade getting left behind? There was a lot of discussion around continuing to need a focus on looking at that data and addressing unique groups' needs, whether that group is a whole building that's not bouncing back quite as well as other people or a specific grade that's not bouncing back. But looking at that and not just saying, well, they're starting to make progress. And we hope that like basically that the younger kids in the district that didn't get hurt by the pandemic are kind of making up the
Scoring are
gaps.
scoring high enough to make the difference, or the grades that are still recovering from the COVID time. And so we wanted to make sure that we had those conversations as well. And once we had those conversations, what to do with that information. So Nathan was data collecting, and I felt, I want to say this to you, I felt he was very receiving of what we were saying, because he's obviously studied the numbers. And then we came at him and said, yeah, but what about this on page whatever? And he just took it. And he'd say, that's another discussion question. That's another discussion question. Our job now is to fulfill the obligation as a board. Did we hear the answers? And as we hear answers, giving some things are going to take time to figure out, and not expecting an answer within the next meeting, but at the same time expecting an answer as it keeps developing.
When we talked about all of the data shows that Linn-Mar is not only ahead of the state, but ahead of other schools in the AEA. But that we talked about that even though we're doing very well, and that's something to be very proud of, we don't forget about the kids that are still in that not proficient. And then we also talked about the kids that are just barely proficient, like they make the bar to be labeled proficient, but they might not have the confidence. And are they the ones that are yo-yoing? Like, are they yo-yoing because they're just barely proficient one year and then they don't get the attention they need to stay proficient? So those were kind of the conversations that the committee was having.
And I know our conversation at the committee meeting got um, into the weeds of some of the inherent challenges in how the data is categorized and reported out on. For example, like the conditions for learning survey. Um, it's grouped by third through fifth, and then sixth through 12th, 11th. But our buildings go to fourth, and then we have 5, 6. And so those groupings aren't by our buildings, they're by those grade groupings. And so it's not like Boulder Peak can just be like, oh, here are my numbers. And so there are just some inherent challenges in that. And then also when we were looking at ELA scores, um, we were lucky enough to have a teacher in our group who is continuing her education. She was in school. She actually logged into her class right there. And I was just like, man, love you. Like, kudos. Like, sorry, I'm kudoing a lot tonight. Apologies. But she's like, okay, is this writing skills or reading or both? And can we see them separate? Because she was talking about how I think our writing, it was one or the other, had for sure gone up. And how we were looking at kind of a collective view. And so just, yeah, it was just like there was more there, and there's some ways we can't cut it. And maybe you can help refine my butchered comments about this. But yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Any questions for us?
It was a good meeting.
Thanks for the report. Appreciate it. Okay, we go to 504, board visit at Lynn Grove Elementary, which was a treat. Any thoughts?
I had a kindergartner climb in my lap and ask me to read him 3 books. So my day was perfect.
I received something very similar. Little girl said, "Excuse me, sir, can I have a hug?" Made my day. It's wonderful watching the teachers. And we kind of caught them off guard a little bit, because coming into conferences and stuff, some of them weren't quite ready. So it was kind of we got to see the real thing, and it was kind of cool. Yeah.
My favorite is watching the kids learn how to think. And from class to class to class we went to, they demonstrated different ways that they were thinking. And I know that this is a theme that goes throughout our entire district, and particularly in math, but I think it's being used in other curriculum and in other ways as well. But I just love being able to see that the kids are learning how to actually think, and not just how to get an answer, but how did you get to this answer, and how did you get to this answer, and how did you get to this answer? And creativity that um, that their brains come up with of the ways that they go about finding answers is really intriguing and exciting. That we're going to have adults in this community that graduate from high school and know how to think and know how to make decisions right away, and that they don't have to fumble through early adulthood quite as much as maybe those of us at the table did.
Thank you, public education.
It was my first board visit to a school, and it was very interesting to see, like, from one grade to another grade to another grade, like, um, the trajectory of the core values. Um, the teachers are very good about introducing us, and then, but they also carried on with the lessons that they were doing. And then we had like these two little buddies who were walking us around, and I want to give a shout out to those two kids because they were on time, man. They were watching the clock. As soon as that clock turned to a certain time, they're like, "We need to go. We have to go to the next one." So it was cool to see these little student leaders, in third graders, fourth graders. Like, what a wonderful experience it was.
Okay.
Anytime I wonder about the future of the country, I look at those kids and the leaders that we had leading us around. It was just a couple kids for myself, but they've got the courage, they've got the skills, and they're owning them, and it's just good to see that.
Cool. Good comments. Thank you. Marion City Council, Laura?
Um, yeah, so the takeaway that I wanted to share has to do with the moratorium related to commercial uses along portions of Tower Harris Road, Highway 13, and the Central Corridor zoning districts. So that was set to be repealed automatically on November 9th, 2024. And um, they asked the extension of that to July 1st, 2025. And this was a planned extension in alignment with the Marion Comprehensive Plan, which is on schedule, but they want to wrap up that comprehensive plan before allowing additional commercial development. That was
That was it?
Yep.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. 506, same folks. Diversity, Equity, Inclusion
If you
Committee.
go to enough meetings, I want to start off this one. This was an exciting meeting. It was fun to walk into a meeting with new adult members and 4 student representatives that were just very articulate, willing to be not only listeners, but were in conversation. So thank you to those the high school staff that brought those names forward, and we look forward to that. We also want to thank our very own Madat, because this was her team, and she took it along with Nathan, and the two of them together have really crafted a very healthy organization that includes the opportunity for great dialogue, but also keeps us moving forward in goals and what we hope to able to be able to show the district this is what's important to us. This is how we dialogue with it, and this is how we encourage opportunities for change. I also want to make sure that I'm not a voting member of that team. Board members are not, but we have the privilege of sharing their words and their wisdom. And so my information comes from that. So huge thanks. I also want to share that we talked about the importance of prior members, existing members, and the commitment to continue to hold diversity, equity, and inclusion at a high standard. This is who we are. Everyone at a public school has value and should be able to be heard. Prior to this meeting, we are looking for a new leadership team, so they will be looking for a new chair, vice chair, and a secretary. We do this every time. Who's taking notes? So that'll be important to get that kind of honed down. Also, the team continued to review their 2024 achievement information. We kind of did the same thing again. We looked at that big document and broke it down with more of an understanding of what that team and that committee works on, and talked through these questions as small groups. What recommendations would you have for our school about any of the data that you are now reviewing? What are the successes you see in the data? And what challenges do you see in the data? So we broke it down again in those three groups, but gave three specific questions to follow up and answer. And that information was collected. I don't have it at this time. Ultimately, they have three areas of strategic planning that they continue to move forward. Restorative practices and conversations, which is really important for students, especially as they have an opportunity to. We talk about this all the time. If in our whole tier system, how does somebody come back into the district, especially if they have conflict, or if they have a conflict with another student, let alone conflict with staff? How does staff welcome a student that's had conflict with them as well? And so, and staff and staff. And so that's a ongoing priority of this group. Strengthening community relations and building a culture of belonging and respect. Wow, this is it is not only really important. You can see if you saw our working template where we're making strides, and where we can say this is something we've actually are working towards. This is something we're accomplishing. When I say accomplish, it usually is we've gone to a meeting and provided an opportunity for people to have conversation. You don't ever end having conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not a one and done kind of conversation. So, how do we set culture to constantly provide a safe place for people in uh, conversation? That led us to a really cool thing where the new high school students that have joined DEI asked DEI team members to please start attending their specific group that they have created at the high school, and it is a Black student union group that is at the high school. And they said, "Would you please come?" And again, when you are an ally to someone else, it is your presence and your listening presence. But when they stand alone, we're not being inclusive. So we stand alongside. And as listeners. So I thought that was exciting to the very end of the meeting, they just took it away and they were just so articulate, and you would be so proud of their ability to share their story through their lens, and it was outstanding.
Uh, so at the start of the meeting, I resigned as the chair. Uh, but I was asked to attend the meeting because Laura was not there. So as an acting board member, and I had to put a different lens on. But what was so cool to see is these four student representatives who showed up for the first time. They were quiet, they were shy towards the starting of it. And then towards the end of the meeting, they're the ones who are carrying the conversation and adding to the conversation and wanting to represent, not only represent DEI, but also asking DEI committee members to come and show up to their events, which was super duper cool. So just wanted to.
I am so excited to hear that we are invited to that. I just wanted to explain. I had some, my family at home really required my attention, and I was um, unable to pull away from them.
You prioritized your family.
What? So of all the teams too, talk about an understanding committee that said that was the priority, and of all the teams to be able to say, well done, and that was wisdom in your own home. So well done.
So, thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Thank you. Superintendent Portmeyer.
Good evening, everyone. Several district honors and highlights tonight. An athletic honor. Congratulations to Dylan Mazinski, our senior Linn-Mar High School football running back, for being named recently KCRG Athlete of the Week. Some academic honors. Congratulations to the 92 Linn-Mar High School students who were inducted into the National Honor Society on October 2nd. Thespian honors. Congratulations to Linn-Mar School Thespian Group Group 680 for a successful presentation of the Crimson House murder. Golf honors, congratulations to the Linn-Mar High School boys golf team for placing first in the Mississippi Valley Conference Mississippi Division Golf Tournament. A Special Olympics honor, congratulations to the 19 Linn-Mar Special Olympics bowling team members for advancing to the state level competition that will be held on November 23rd. Venture Academics highlight, congratulations to Mr. Corey Brinkmeyer, Linn-Mar High School teacher, and his advanced business/venture academics students for partnering with the City of Marion to develop ideas, branding, and names for the new Marion Water Park that is set to open within the next 5 years. We have an alumni highlight, a music highlight. Congratulations to Linn-Mar alumnus Cabin O'Hara for participating in the October 13th special concert on our campus with the West Point Glee Club Nightcaps. A nutrition services honor. Thank you to our nutrition services team for their dedication to serving students and staff nutritious meals throughout the school year. We honor them each and every day, but we celebrated them during National School Lunch Week. Linn-Mar supporter highlight. Thanks goes out to Farmers State Bank for their continued support of the Linn-Mar School Foundation. With their support, the foundation has distributed over $75,000 to teachers to assist in reducing out-of-pocket expenses for classroom needs. Thank you to Farmers State Bank. We've touched upon America Reads already tonight. I was mentioned in our mission moment, but thank you goes out to Angela Burke, Community Service Coordinator, and all of the volunteer coordinators who help support America Reads. The day was a great success. I was able to read in Novak and at Echo Hill and at Hazel Point. Thank you to all of those of you that were also able to attend that day. And then another football highlight, kudos goes out to the Linn-Mar Lions football players who've been volunteering on their Friday mornings back in their elementary buildings where they attended schools as they greet students. There's so many more highlights. I know there's a lot of things going on in the district right now, so apologies if we haven't named something. Hopefully it's going to come up next time at the next board meeting. We are proud and excited to announce that over the last week and a half or so, we have moved into the new administration building. And I believe as of today that we officially have everybody in. So we're just still getting settled. There's still punch list items and some things to get done, but we're super thrilled about being there. And again, a big shout out to Hazel Point and Boulder Peak for being wonderful hosts and their leadership for just welcoming our former LRC departments over the last 4 months. We've been spending time onboarding our latest board member. It's been great to have Midhat with us. We've done some collaboration meetings, whether it's been preschool or special ed with our Grantwood AEA counterparts. Also, we've held a lead learning session and principal meetings this month. Done visits to several buildings. And as far as community engagement, we continue to meet regularly, either with the Marion superintendent or the city of Marion, just on a variety of things. We appreciate their partnership. Recently, we participated in a winter operations planning meeting. So that was nice to have all of us at the table to kind of think about what does the snow day event look like? What's the impact on our streets, and what are each of our needs in that kind of situation? So those discussions are ongoing, and we appreciate that. Attended recently a Medco board meeting and a Rotary luncheon. As far as other facilities or performance venue, the precast installation is complete. Caulking of panels is ongoing. They are forming and pouring interior footings and foundations. That's ongoing with some backfill happening there. Restrooms will be complete and turned over for use by November 8th. And so I'm sure that's going to be a welcome addition back to the high school. As far as the high school indoor activities center, those schematic design pricing drawings and systems narratives have been sent to the cost estimator, so they're still with them and hoping to see something fairly soon on that. And again, just a few items to finish up with the administration building. And then in particular, as far as a boardroom, we're still waiting a countertop there, working on partitions between the 3 sections, but we'll end up being able to divide that room into 3 sections, a sound system, and of course there's some punch items, some cabinetry, but by and large things are looking good and we're super excited about being there, like I said earlier. Some upcoming dates then, next week, November 4th and 5th, we have no school for professional days. And if you recall last year, we had approved a school calendar in December, January time period, and then we came back and we approved a different one in May. And that's to make sure that we had the November 5th day off as our sites for voting expanded across more of our attendance centers. And so that was purposeful. And typically you would have, we had typically seen 3 of these professional development days land, I believe, in the month of October in prior calendars. And it was just a way for us to just to make it maybe more feasible for adults to be moving in and out of the building for voter for voting purposes, and not to have our families worry about additional adult traffic. So I'm looking forward to that opportunity there. We've got high school conferences coming up on November 21st, and then a comp day around Thanksgiving and Thanksgiving break. With that, I'd entertain any questions.
How many of our buildings are now voting sites?
Oh, I
Went
knew you were
from
going to ask me
1 to
that. I
1.
think we're up to 5.
I knew it was a significant.
Yeah, from 1 to 5. We had Boulder Peak initially as the only one, and then when it was jumping into more of our elementaries in particular, we decided to take that next step.
Okay, thank you, Amy. New business. We don't have any unfinished business. New business approval of the budget, please. Or financial report, sorry.
Motion to approve certified annual financial report for fiscal year 2023-24 as presented in Exhibit 701.1.
Second.
Motion by Melissa, second by Katie. Questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of early graduation.
Motion to approve the first quarter early graduation request as presented.
Second.
Motion by Britt, second by Katie. Congratulations to these young folks for taking early graduation. Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. SBRC allowable growth. Need a motion, please?
Motion to authorize district administration to submit a request to the School Budget Review Committee for a modified supplemental amount of, wow, 4,907,138.70. Did I do that? No, 497,138.73 relating to the fiscal year 2024 English Learner Access.
Second.
Motion by Katie, second by Medhat. John just had a heart attack over there.
I know. Sorry. I was.
Any other questions?
It's all me.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Hey, I'm on a roll.
Letting of bus bids.
Ready? Motion to approve the letting of the bus bids for the purchase of 4 replacement buses for the total cost not to exceed $650,000, with the expense to be funded by Pebble dollars.
Second.
Motion by Katie, second by
There,
Medhat.
now I know how to do it.
Questions on that for John?
It'll be exciting to see what bids we get back. I remember when we walked through this last year, we had, some question about hydrogen buses or compressed CNG buses, right? Not hydrogen,
Propane.
propane. There we go. Neither. of them.
Not hydrogen.
Well, I'm looking to the future.
Uranium buses. I do actually, given the timeliness of the budget presentation, um, is it possible that these buses are more fuel efficient? Like, could this decrease those costs?
I'm laughing.
Okay, too hypothetical.
I'm just
But they're-
laughing because it takes us 2 years to get the buses we approved by this year. So in 2 years. maybe.
Okay, all right.
They're,
Exactly.
our bus or our transportation folks are always working on buying fuel ahead, right? And propane is, if it's cheaper, fuel, diesel, whatever it is. So they're always working on those options. So hopefully they can bring that cost down. But
We should visit this.
yeah, we have visited the bus barn and it's really entertaining. That's a request.
Yes. I'd like to visit the bus barn.
Visit the bus barn and go on a bus ride. Like go for a morning route.
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, we have a motion from Katie, second by Medhat. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. We move to open enrollment requests, please.
Motion to approve the open enrollment request as presented.
Second.
Motion by Medhat, second by Britt. Questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. You gonna entertain us or what? Okay. 707, discussion on early separation. I think probably defer that to Jonathan, but at this point, since we've given early separation the last 2 years, we will not give early separation this year. Is that a quick statement to make?
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, as we look at kind of where we're at budget wise, very early projections in the next year, and doing this the last 2 cycles, we will not have an early separation package for next year.
Questions? All good, thank you. Now we'll discuss the IASB proposed articles of incorporations and bylaws. I know Britt watched this. Melissa and myself each watched this. Do you have some comments, Britt, on it, or?
I don't have any problem with it. We just have to agree how our representative is gonna vote.
Right. So kind of,
Time the bylaw changes are pretty basic.
yeah, there's nothing major in here and we hope they don't surprise us. Some of the biggest thing they talked about was public schools are actually corporations.
Yeah, where'd that come from?
And it's always been that way. It's a public school corporation. It's chapter 274. And what they had in here in some of the spots, they had names of people in there and they pulled those out. And then also, a charter school is not a public school corporation. Keep that in mind. So that's all part of the bylaw changes as well. They talked about associate members. Can you, that was hard for me to track. Can you help with
So-
that?
They're eliminating the mention of associate membership in the bylaws because there are no associate members. So it's kind of removing something that no longer is a thing.
Okay.
So everyone's just, you're a regular member or you're not a member.
Yeah, that was gonna be my only question is if we knew of any potential associate members that we might have any reason to think that we would want them to have the ability to become members.
So in
But
the
I don't know that.
in the first email that they sent this out in, they said that the change, there were no current associate memberships. Like it wasn't a membership category that was being utilized, so they were just going to remove it and then look for ways to encourage in future people who wanted to be IASB members, how that would work through regular membership.
Okay.
So it's not like it's not canceling anyone's membership by removing their classification. It's a classification that no longer is utilized, so they're removing it from the bylaws.
I was seeing it as that this would be how those that might be related to education but aren't necessarily school. That's how their membership classification that their membership would fall under. And so that would no longer be an option. Because right now, under regular membership, that's only schools, area boards of directors, and AAs. And so the associate membership would be like an educational program, a nonprofit agency that is involved with education or something like that. And I don't know that, I don't know any particular reason, but I just wanted to make sure that there was the discussion around it.
So whichever one of you ends up being the person, you can ask that question. So they have microphones in the room, and before the vote, they put it up on the screen like these are the bylaw changes, and you can get up and ask questions. And then you can also like if we want to say like we want to make sure that this doesn't cut people out from being engaged with school boards. And if it does, then we don't like it. You can request that section not be part of the bylaw change. And then that's a separate vote. So then they vote on that first and you see how many people in the room, how many other delegates would agree with you. And then it could be removed or it could not be removed. You have the option to ask those questions.
Anyone have thoughts on that? If it would preclude organizations that are connected to schools from being able to be an associate membership, would we want that or would we not want that? I don't have strong opinions. I just,
Well, can you kind of give an example of what you thought that might be?
I was thinking even, actually, I was thinking about ICANN, and whether or not I didn't know if they were members currently, but I was thinking like that to me would be an organization that might make sense to be a member of this IASB, but at the same time, I don't know if it does make sense. So, and I didn't know if they were members or not, and if that would preclude them. But at the same time, I can also, the counter argument could be members or organizations who have been formed who are not maybe in support of public education, who are actively working against it, who could then also join as associate members.
So ICANN is not a member of ISB, and I really think that it would be a good question to ask the ISB board members, like what is the board purpose and desire for that membership, and you know, is the purpose of ISB to be open to membership to anyone associated with education, or is it really to focus their needs and attention on school boards and school districts, and then allow those other organizations to come in as exhibitors and speak with school boards and school districts? I can say that in my tenure at ICANN, we've never been approached by ISB to be a member. I don't think that they actively recruit associate membership, and I would say that only because they're getting rid of it and say no one is one. But I think what it comes down to is, as members, do we think that that is the right direction for the board to move towards? Do we think that as members of this organization, it benefits our membership and our schools to exclude groups like ICANN, or, you know, I'm also thinking about like ISEA or, you know, things like that. Or do we benefit by having like this focus on school board work? And then we can hear from anyone else outside of that as if they want to, if they choose to exhibit. So I don't know.
Because they still give the right to the organization to reject a membership, even if they have associate memberships there. If somebody comes in and wants to be a member, they can reject that, right?
It doesn't necessarily say
It
that
does
they
not
do.
say that.
Okay, so those are all good questions to
Yeah.
ask. I didn't think it'd be a big deal, but those are very good questions to ask. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it just says it's a if we kept associate membership, it's a non-voting membership available to any individual, organization, or agency involved in or related to education.
So potentially it could be
Applications.
So what's, if you can't vote, what's the point of having a membership?
to add cause. I don't know for sure, other than to get the information.
Very.
They
You're
would
right.
have access to all the information.
Shall be the duty of the membership committee to decide all matters relating to eligibility for associate non-voting membership and to qualify candidates for associate non-voting membership.
Okay.
Okay.
We've got what
Okay.
we need. So I appreciate all the
Got it.
discussion. Thank you very much.
So what is the board's decision?
We just need to ask questions, find out what's available.
Right, but then you're gonna have to vote. You don't get to ask questions and bring it back to this board
Yeah.
and report before we decide what we want you to do.
Are you gonna give us that option, or do you wanna have an opinion?
Do you have any concerns with the bylaw changes as they exist right now?
I have no concerns.
I have no concern. I think it's fine. I think if they don't think they need associate members, then that's fine. But I don't ever think it's bad to ask questions. So,
On why?
yeah.
Okay, good, Justin.
I really don't like section 6. I'm sorry.
Don't
Which one's
Say more about that.
Which section 6? There's multiple sections.
We're just trying to move on.
You start with
I know you were.
which article?
I know you were.
We're into this a little bit more.
Well, this
Article what? Article
Ar-
3?
Article 3,
Section 6?
right? Section 6, which is I was just struggling to think through that, where it essentially says that because the president of the IASB is an active school board member of a school board in the state of Iowa. Essentially, it says if they get voted out of office at their local school board, they can retain office at the organization level.
They're not changing that.
He likes it.
They're strictly changing from his, her to their, they.
Yep.
They're actually not pulling this out and changing.
Yeah,
that's not-
no, yep.
Thinking what Justin's saying is he doesn't like the idea that you can be defeated in election and then still represent for up to 2 years on the ISB board.
I mean, I hear you.
So if they're taking feedback, that'd be one, but it doesn't sound like they are, so.
You can always raise it.
Delegates.
in delegates.
Would you like for them
Raise
to be
that.
raised as a,
If the rest of the board thinks that that is something that we'd like to have raised, that's just my personal opinion.
Okay,
Board, sound.
do you agree with that?
I do, because I think that, the person, the way that the ISB board is set up is that board members represent certain segments of the state, but it still says under them what school district they're from. So, let's say one of us wasn't reelected, but we had chosen this role, we would stay on the board. It would then look like there are 8 members of the Linn-Mar School District board. And there would just be this person floating out there associated with Linn-Mar, but not really associated with Linn-Mar.
Yeah, that's a great observation.
It is, I'm gonna say, there is a sequencing here, so the reason why you're the president-elect is to watch, you know that you are going to someday be the president, so there is some sequencing and some investment in time. I mean, this is somebody who, I've watched enough of these meetings now that I'm just saying it's not like there you have they didn't get to this to this office with a bone to pick with this organization. Now, maybe a member would, but not necessarily president or president-elect. They also have their hands full. They're also with their own school boards. I understand your concern. It's just on enough nonprofits, there is a way that eventually you go, there's a sequencing for leadership. And these people have to not only sequence through the leadership of this organization, they have to keep their elections going so they're still candidates within their own office. That's a lot of what ifs. So I don't think there was anything sinister in here, is what I was trying to say.
But I will ask the question.
At your discretion.
Yeah. Yep.
Otherwise, for your other thing, just to put to bed, I, I, I would, I don't know if we're taking motions here, but I would just allow whoever is sitting, so Barry, if you or Melissa, to
Perfect.
take your own decision as appropriate on that other issue.
Cool. Thank you. 800 consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as
Left
presented.
side of the room.
second,
Motion by Britt, second by Melissa. Any questions or comments on this? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Now we'll move forward to our calendar. Wednesday evening, there's a chamber event. Board visit on Thursday.
And just to note, I can't be in 2 places at the same time, so I'm actually attending there's a meeting, school counselor meeting, during that time. I will attend that.
you're gonna attend that.
I
Okay.
will attend that.
I am
It's-
planning to be at the Chamber of Commerce annual meeting, so I'll be at that. You can. go
Yeah,
to
and,
the-
and I work Wednesdays, so either way, it was a conflict, but it just happens that I can make one work a little easier than the other,
Wonderful.
so. That's why I'm not attending the other little side gig.
It's actually at 4 o'clock, the counselor advisory, not 4:15, which then makes me unable to attend the chamber. I'm not on there for the board, but I'm on there for my job. So I have to go to the counselor advisory.
Okay, it'll all be good. Thank you very much. November 7th, Marion City Council. Need a volunteer? I'll do it.
I thought that was me.
Are you on there?
Yes,
You want it?
yes, it is
It's
you.
Brit.
The one that's the week of ISB is the one I'm signed up for, whenever that is. The 21st is the one that's mine.
Oh, so the 7th, November 7th.
Brett, are you able to attend the venture meeting that day? I have a work
Yes.
conflict. Okay.
Yep, I can.
Just want
I'm
to make
doing
sure one of
venture.
us are gonna be able to be there.
We hope to have our November 11th meeting at the new boardroom. If that works out, and we very well might have a work session that evening as well, if we can work out the details. So just put it on your schedule.
Red carpet or red ribbon? Ribbon
We're
cutting.
not ready to cut that yet.
Is there any proposed date for?
We haven't got that far yet.
I'm gonna name it first.
We're working through it. Yeah, we gotta get through the naming rights first.
Details.
That policy committee's dragging their feet.
So the city council on the 7th. I thought Laura had signed up for that last meeting.
Probably.
You want it?
Yeah.
Okay, you got it. Scratch my name off. Okay, anything else for the good of the board this evening?
If I may. I was unable to go to trunk or treat with my kids tonight at Indian Creek. My mom took them, but
Oh,
Aw, thank you.
a motion to adjourn I made.
it's 6:44.
Second.
Second.
Motion by Laura, second by Melissa. All in favor, say aye.
No, wait, how do I say it? Not just I may go. No.
Okay.